Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hey there.
Today we are digging into a true American icon, one of the biggest stars Hollywood ever produced, John Wayne.
That's right. And for this deep dive, we're going behind that legendary Duke persona that you know from the screen, trying to explore the actual man.
Yeah.
Our source material, it's built around excerpts from Michael Munn's book, John Wayne, the man behind the myth.
And what's interesting about this book right away is, well, the author's perspective. Munn actually knew Wayne personally, had affection for him, but he's pretty upfront. He admired Wayne, sure, but he also says, frankly, that he thought plenty of other actors were objectively, better actors.
Right.
He's definitely not trying to just print the legend if the real story is maybe more complicated.
Exactly. And you get a sense of that complexity from people who knew him well, like Maureen O'Hara. She called him a beautiful human being, even while, fully acknowledging his flaws. Munn's overall view, based on his time and research, is that Wayne was a man who tried, though not always succeeded, to do what was right.
And it sounds like that drive, that do what was right thing, it came from a very specific worldview, almost a black and white view of the world.
It did, yeah. The book highlights Wayne's philosophy, which he actually put into words in the Alamo. There's right and there's wrong. You got to do one or the other.
Oh.
For him, there really weren't many gray areas. And Munn suggests that this conviction, this absolute certainty, was both his greatest virtue and, at times, his greatest flaw.
Okay, so our mission in this deep dive is to use this material to unpack those key insights, trace his incredible journey from, like, a shy kid to a global icon.
Right.
Understand more about his personality, the challenges he faced, and how that enduring image was forged. We're looking for those surprising nuggets, the details that reveal the man behind the myth for you.
And to do that, well, you have to start at the beginning. He wasn't born John Wayne.
Right, he was Marion Orson, born in Winterset, Iowa. And this source makes it clear his childhood had its difficulties. His parents had marital problems. His mother was dominant. His father, more easygoing.
Yeah.
And their arguments created insecurity for young Marion.
Yeah, and there's a really poignant anecdote about his dog, Jenny. When she got sick and sadly had to be shot, the Humane Society, that's the animal welfare group, accused 7-year-old Marion of not feeding her.
Oh, wow.
Which the book says was proven false. But the reaction from his parents was really telling. His mother scolded him, while his father praised his courage for standing up for himself in the fights that followed.
Fights that, according to the source, came from his shyness and anxiety as a boy.
Yeah.
Classmates apparently laughed at his Midwestern accent and his name, Marion, which, led to brawls. His father, Clyde, really instilled in him the importance of standing up for himself, even if you didn't win every time.
That lesson about holding your ground seems like a core part of who he became. His path to Hollywood wasn't the typical one either. It was through football, actually.
Football?
Yeah, he was training under the legendary coach Howard Jones at USC, the University of Southern California.
Okay.
And through Coach Jones, he met Cowboy star Tom Mix, who had a deal with Fox Studios to hire USC players for summer jobs. So summer of 1926, Marion and his buddy Don Williams ended up at Fox. Marion started going by his nickname, Duke Morrison.
Duke Morrison.
But in those early days, he wasn't exactly on the fast track to stardom. He primarily worked as a prop man, basically moving furniture and sets around.
Just a prop guy.
Yeah, mostly. He occasionally picked up work as an extra or in minor roles under the name Duke Morrison. The source mentions early films from 1929 and 1930 like Words and Music, Rough Romance, and Cheer Up and Smile.
And this is where you get that classic story of his first meeting with Ward Bond on a train.
That's the one. Heading to Annapolis for the film Salute, Duke apparently took one look at Bond and said something like, "You're not getting on this train, Bond. You're too ugly to be in movies."
Oh my gosh, what a way to start a friendship.
Mutual light chuckle.
Yeah.
Legendary beginning to a legendary friendship. Yeah.
Okay, so he's Duke Morrison, prop man, picking up small roles. How does he make the leap, get the name change, and what does the book reveal about the drama behind it?
Well, that pivotal moment came with director Roll Walsh in the film The Big Trail in 1930. Walsh was looking for a young lead who embodied an authentic American pioneer spirit for this epic Western.
And the famous story, the one Walsh told, was that he just saw Duke carrying a prop across the Fox lot and had that aha moment. That's the guy.
Right.
And it was Fox executives who suggested the name John Wayne.
Now, this book presents a conflicting story, which Wayne himself reportedly told later, claiming his agent proposed the name during a script meeting.
An agent.
Yeah, but the author here leans toward the Walsh version, and it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Wayne was primarily a prop man. He likely didn't even have an agent at that point.
Good point.
The author suggests Wayne might have, invented the agent story later to avoid offending his close friend, John Ford.
And why would that offend Ford so much?
Because Ford felt completely blindsided and, frankly, betrayed. He saw Duke taking a starring role and a whole new screen identity from another director, especially Walsh, who was a bit of a rival.
Ah,
Ford believed, probably, that if anyone was going to discover this kid, it should have been him. He possibly had plans to guide Duke's career himself.
so this wasn't just hurt feelings, it caused a serious break between them.
Absolutely. The book says Ford refused to speak to Wayne for years.
Years, wow.
John Carradine, another actor who worked with Ford, is quoted saying that Ford, at his worst, was a monster who saw his actors as his personal property. Ford's silence was his way of punishing Duke for this perceived disloyalty.
That's a really intense dynamic within Hollywood friendships. Meanwhile, The Big Trail didn't become the hit everyone hoped for commercially.
No, it bombed, really. Widescreen format issues hurt it too.
Even though critics praised Wayne's pleasingly natural performance. So instead of shooting to stardom, he was right back where he started.
Back to struggling for work, and this had a direct impact on his personal life.
Yes, he was planning to marry Josephine Saenz, who came from a significantly more sophisticated, cultured background than him.
Right.
The source describes them as madly in love, but pulls apart in society. He apparently hoped some of her sophistication would rub off on him.
Huh.
Their wedding plans actually had to be put on hold because he was out of work after The Big Trail flopped.
A tough break, and it seems things got even tougher.
They did. He ended up at Columbia Pictures, headed by the notorious Harry Cohn.
Oh, boy.
According to Wayne, Cohn dropped him and then spread rumors around Hollywood that he was a rebel and a drunkard.
Ouch.
Wayne admitted he might have been a bit of both at times, but he was adamant he never got drunk while working. That experience was so bad, he vowed never to work at Columbia again.
So essentially, he was iced out for a year. He said, nobody in Hollywood would touch me. What did he do during that time?
He went to smaller studios, Warner Bros., briefly, then Mascot Pictures, grinding it out in B-Westerns. These were made incredibly fast, sometimes in just 6 days, with tiny budgets, maybe $30,000 to $40,000.
Wow.
For him, it was an opportunity to learn my craft, even if, as the book notes, he found them less interesting than the cartoons being made by the same producer, Leon Schlesinger.
Cartoons were better. The B-movie world was tough, but it was a crucial training ground for him. It sounds like he learned by doing.
Absolutely. And this is where he formed a really critical relationship with stuntman Yakima Canutt.
Ah, Yakinat, a legend.
Total legend. Canutt was a former rodeo champion who basically invented modern stunt work for Westerns. He also often played the villains in those films.
Canutt wasn't just a stunt double. He helped shape the action sequences you see on screen, right?
Exactly. He'd beef up the action and double Wayne in dangerous shots. The book shares a great anecdote from Canutt about a practical joke he played on Wayne during West of the Divide in 1934. Canutt started pretending to meticulously time Wayne taking breaks.
Oh, no.
Getting it down in a little book.
And Duke bought it.
Oh, yeah. Canutt kept it up for a week. One day, Wayne took a drink during a break, saw Canutt looking at his watch and making a note, and he just blew his top.
Yeah, I bet.
Canutt ran, apparently, and it wasn't until someone told Wayne it was a joke later that he finally burst out laughing.
Yeah.
But he warned Canutt he'd left himself wide open for revenge.
That camaraderie, even with the jokes, seems vital on those tough shoots.
It definitely paints a picture of the environment. He also worked on mascot serials like The Three Musketeers out in the Mojave Desert, filming in extreme heat with 2 directors often shooting simultaneously just to get it done.
That sounds brutal.
Noah Beery Jr. worked with him there and noted Wayne's professionalism. He was always on time. Beery felt Wayne really started developing his camera sense during these serials, understanding how to move and look for the camera.
So he's learning the technical side, the discipline, and developing his screen persona. Who's he looking up to?
He said he was really inspired by watching Harry Carey and John Ford's Westerns. He decided his screen cowboy should be like Carey. Someone with realism, a real man.
He was consciously building the foundation for the persona that would make him famous, even in these low-budget films. What were those B-movie producers like?
Like Paul Malvern, who produced the Lone Star Westerns at Monogram. He'd pull plots from dime novels, apparently.
Dime novels, okay.
The focus was entirely on action. Dialogue was minimal outdoors because of sound issues, and staying under budget was paramount. Wayne was making like $5,000 a week, working constantly, which he thought was pretty good money at the time.
And you have this fascinating detail about him working with real cowboys who were out of work because of the Depression?
Yes, the book notes they found solace in each other's company. Wayne really liked being with them. You can imagine how that connection reinforced that real man image he was aiming for.
Makes sense.
There's also the story about Wayne and Knut doubling for each other in fight scenes, with Wayne sometimes even doing his own stunts, like allegedly jumping into the sea from a cliff for a shot.
Really? He did that?
Well, Knut confirmed Wayne was fearless and did many stunts, but apparently questioned the truth of that specific jump into the sea story, so who knows on that one.
After all those years grinding it out in B-movies, learning his craft from stuntmen, and working alongside real cowboys, how did he finally get that shot at leading man stardom?
Well, perhaps surprisingly, it came through a reconciliation with the man who had frozen him out, John Ford.
Ah, Ford again.
The book describes how in 1935, while Wayne was just in some coastal bar, he received a message inviting him aboard Ford's yacht, the Mariner.
After years of not speaking.
Years of silence. And according to the account, there was no explanation, no apology needed. Ford just greeted him simply, "Hi, Duke, sit down." Just like that. The past was the past.
Seems that way. And it started a new ritual. Sunday afternoons on the Mariner, they'd read, have dinner, play cards. Wayne would sometimes have tequila to help with hangovers. He noted Ford usually didn't drink on the yacht. The source also mentions this time away from home likely contributed to his failing marriage with Josephine.
Right. And then, out of nowhere, came the opportunity for Stagecoach.
Yes, in 1939, Ford, to Wayne's surprise, asked him if he felt he could play the lead role of the Ringo Kid. It hadn't even occurred to Wayne that Ford would consider him for a major role after all the B-movies and their estrangement.
But Ford wasn't the only person who had to be convinced, right? The producer.
That's right. Producer Walter Wanger had final approval. He insisted Wayne test for the part.
The screen test.
Yeah. Claire Trevor, who was already cast as Dallas, did a scene with him for the test. She recalled finding him a little nervous and perhaps even a bit wooden during the test, but, good enough to persuade Wanger to take a gamble on this B-movie actor.
And they had Yakima Knut on Stagecoach, too. He must have been crucial for that.
Absolutely. Knut was key to the film's famous action, doing stunt work, including that legendary Stagecoach chase scene. Fun fact for you, that was shot near Victorville, California, not Monument Valley, as many people assume.
Really? I always pictured Monument Valley.
Nope. Victorville. Knut recalled Wayne's trust, saying Wayne would tell him, "If Yak says I can do it, I'll do it."
Claire Trevor's memories of working with him are interesting, too. Chemistry on screen, but not off.
She said Ford actually eased up on Wayne during filming, giving him gentle praise. They had fantastic on-screen chemistry, yeah, but off-screen, they were just good friends. She noted she wasn't really his type. She was blonde, whereas he preferred dark Latin types. At this point, despite the marriage troubles, he was still very much in love with Josephine.
And even though the Ringo Kid was technically the smallest main role in the script, it became the pivotal one.
The source points out it was partly due to a script accident, but primarily because of Wayne's undeniable star quality and convincing performance. He just captivated the audience in that role.
But the reaction wasn't uniformly ecstatic, was it, within the industry?
Curiously, no. While the public immediately fell in love with him as Ringo Kid, the industry and critics were not particularly impressed. This is wild, but he actually had to go back to Republic Pictures to finish his Musketeer B-movie contract before Stagecoach even premiered to the public.
Get out. Back to B-movies after Stagecoach.
Yeah. Yep. Before it was even released. Shows how unsure the industry still was.
So, it was a breakthrough with the audience, but the industry was slow to fully embrace him. As he moved into the 1940s and 50s, his star rose significantly, but he also faced major challenges. Politics became a bigger thing for him.
He did. Yeah, this period saw his political views really solidify. The source notes he became aware of communist activity in Hollywood as early as 1937.
That early?
Yeah, seeing it hidden behind anti-fascism and noticing some within the Screen Actors Guild, that's the actors union, stirring dissension, he felt something was happening, and I knew it was not good.
And those views started appearing in his films.
Yes. For example, Three Faces West in 1939, which touched on refugees fleeing Nazis and finding salvation in America. And later, Three Godfathers in 1948 was dedicated to Harry Carey, his early inspiration.
His personal life also took a significant turn in the 40s. Divorce and remarriage.
It did. He divorced Josephine and married Esperanza Bauer, known as Chada. The book includes some blunt observations from friends like Paul Fix, who described her background colorfully. Let's just say that.
Okay.
But Wayne saw her differently. He found her beautiful, sultry, fiery, someone who could match his drinking, and uninhibited. He told Fix he found her more exciting than even Dietrich.
Wow.
The source suggests he mistook excitement for love, and friends tried to warn him she was a party girl, but he wouldn't listen because he was so happy.
This was also during World War II, and he didn't enlist. That caused some talk later.
Right. That became a point of criticism, with some suggesting he stayed home and got rich. But the source clarifies he received a 2A deferment, meaning he was deferred in support of national health, safety, or interest. It officially grounded him.
So it wasn't his choice.
No, but he privately felt like a fraud for not being in uniform.
But he did undertake a secret mission during a tour of the South Pacific in Australia for the OSS.
Yes, reportedly a mission for the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA. He was collecting information and assessing General MacArthur, though MacArthur supposedly got wise to it and avoided meeting him. Wayne received a certificate of commendation, but in a classic harsh Ford move, Ford had a plaque made out of copper, which Wayne saw as Ford putting Duke down for not enlisting, so he didn't even bother picking up the certificate.
Man, Ford's behavior towards him sounds consistently complex, sometimes cruel, even on set. They were expendable.
You see it starkly there, in 1945. Ford treated Wayne harshly, accusing him of not knowing how to salute because he hadn't joined up, while showing great respect for Robert Montgomery, who had served.
That's rough.
Montgomery eventually defended Wayne, which led to Ford apparently crying and Wayne actually comforting him. It just highlights the depth and, frankly, dysfunction of their bond.
Around this time, he also started actively seeking more control over his films he wanted to produce.
Definitely. It began with Tall in the Saddle in 1944. He worked closely with the producer, had input on the script and casting. This experience cemented his determination to produce his own films eventually.
And he developed a strong philosophy about filmmaking itself, business and craft.
He saw it as a business that absolutely had to make money, yes, but also a craft that required professionalism and emotional honesty from the actors. He hated delays or holdups on set and expected everyone else to be just as professional as he was.
His political convictions seem to have bled onto set as well, like during Flame of the Barbary Coast. Arguments on set.
Yes, in 1945, working with screenwriter Borden Chase, described here as a lefty, and director Joseph Kane, Wayne would argue politics on set. He clarified his issue wasn't with the Russian people, but with communism itself, and he predicted Stalin's communist state would be the biggest threat after the war.
And this wasn't just talk on set. He took action. The Motion Picture Alliance.
He did. Encouraged by Ward Bond, he did some unofficial work for the Motion Picture Alliance Against Communism, often referred to as the MPA.
And that led to that run-in with Frank Capra.
Yeah, apparently. Capra, director of It's a Wonderful Life, reportedly told Wayne to go to hell for suggesting Capra should check the suitability of actress Anne Revere for his film, reminding Wayne that he himself had stayed home during the war. The source says Wayne was furious.
He really stepped into a very public role in the anti-communist movement in Hollywood, became the face of it, really.
He became its figurehead, serving as president of the Motion Picture Alliance for 3 consecutive terms starting in 1949. He openly spoke against communism and was a strong supporter of Senator Joseph McCarthy. His view was blunt. If communists were in the business, they should just go over to Russia.
And according to the source, this outspoken stance led to some incredibly dramatic, even terrifying events. Assassination attempts.
Yes, the alleged assassination attempts by communists. It sounds like something out of a movie itself. The book mentions Orson Welles believes Stalin himself tried to have Wayne killed.
Stalin? Seriously?
Yeah, that's what Welles believed, according to this. Yakima Canutt recounted thwarting one attempt in Burbank, which Wayne apparently referred to as the Bloody Battle of Burbank, where he and others confronted alleged assassins who were then supposedly sent back to Russia.
That's insane.
The source states Wayne kept these attempts secret from his family to avoid worrying them, and that he later linked his refusal to change his lifestyle, despite FBI advice, to American courage after 9/11. It's a pretty wild claim.
While facing these external threats, his personal life was also in turmoil. That marriage to Chada.
It became increasingly difficult, leading to a very bitter and public divorce. She accused him of cruelty and having an affair with actress Gail Russell during the filming of Wake of the Red Witch.
Messy.
Very. Director Bud Boticher was reportedly furious when Wayne testified untruthfully during the trial, claiming Shada was alone with him for 2 hours when she wasn't. The divorce battle took it out of Duke, leaving him exhausted and feeling guilty. Tragically, Chada died a year later at just 38 from a heart attack, and the book indicates Wayne felt responsible.
Wow, that's heavy. He eventually began a relationship with Pilar Palad, whom he would later marry.
Yes. And the birth of his daughter Isa in 1956 brought him immense joy. The source says he was absolutely gaga over her.
But there seems to have been distance between his children from his different marriages.
Yeah, Isa reportedly wrote later that she never knew if the warmth from her older half-siblings was genuine or just a show they put on for their father. The book suggests Wayne seemed to avoid confrontation with his older children, possibly stemming from lingering guilt over leaving their mother. Though Claire Trevor felt his older children did love and respect him despite his belief otherwise. Michael was the tough man. Patrick had his humor.
Throughout the 1940s and 50s, despite these personal and political challenges, he starred in films that cemented his status, like Red River.
Absolutely. Red River in 1948 with Howard Hawks, an epic Western that really delved into complex father-son conflict between his character Dunson and Montgomery Clift's character Garth. That fight scene between them was notoriously challenging.
Yeah.
Rehearsed over several days, partly, the source says, to make Clift, who apparently didn't know how to punch or move initially, look convincing.
And that ending was a point of contention, right? The reconciliation.
Yes. The source calls it the unforgivable ending, where Denson and Garth reconcile instead of Clift shooting Wayne. Many felt the shooting would have been a far more powerful classic Western conclusion. Hawks defended it by saying he just didn't believe in making films where the protagonist died.
Then you have the beloved The Quiet Man in 1952 with John Ford and Maureen O'Hara. Totally different vibe.
A completely different tone, but an absolute classic. The book mentions a sweet onset tradition where Maureen O'Hara would sing sweetly, and Wayne would sing hilariously off-key for Ford's wife, Mary, who found it hysterical.
That's great.
Wayne really liked O'Hara because she wasn't girly and dainty. She was feminine but tough and didn't mind his rough language. And the fight scene with Victor McLaglen is legendary, made more remarkable by the fact that McLaglen was nearly 70 at the time, and Wayne was 45.
70. Wow. And an iconic moment where Wayne's character kicks down the door. That was his idea.
Wayne himself suggested that to Ford. He argued that his character, Thornton, wouldn't just leave his wife locked in a room like that. The writer, Frank Nugent, agreed, and that's how they shot it. Wayne said it became one of his favorite moments in any of his films.
Not everyone was a fan during production, though. The producer.
Producer Herbert Yates, yeah. Reportedly complained about the scenery being too green and the humor being too Irish, worried it wouldn't be commercial, tried to cut costs wherever he could. Ford basically ignored him.
He also starred in films that weren't universally praised, like Trouble Along the Way or especially The Conqueror, playing Genghis Khan.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Seen as, frankly, out of his depth as Genghis Khan. Let's put it that way. But even in films that didn't quite work, he remained professional. The source notes he knew as much about filmmaking as anyone, and was often right when he complained about production decisions. And then, of course, there's The Searchers in 1956, widely considered one of his greatest performances, showing his dramatic depth.
Despite these successes, his true passion project, The Alamo, was incredibly difficult to get made.
It was his dream, his obsession, really. But studios kept turning him down unless Ford directed it.
And he didn't want Ford.
He wanted to direct it himself. United Artists finally agreed, but with a catch. He had to play a major role. He reluctantly took the part of Davy Crockett, as he'd initially only wanted a cameo as Sam Houston.
And even casting The Alamo had its challenges. Widmark, Heston.
He wanted Charlton Heston for Bowie or Travis, but United Artists insisted on Richard Widmark, whom Wayne later admitted was magnificent in the role. The book also shares a funny anecdote about Lawrence Harvey's Shakespearean audition for his part, which reportedly cracked Wayne up. Harvey was one of the first major British actors to really cross over and play Americans in U.S. films.
The scale of the Alamo production sounds immense, like a military operation.
It was described exactly like that. Thousands of extras, 5 cameras running simultaneously, coordinating everything via walkie-talkie. The book notes Wayne worked closely with cinematographer Bill Clothier to ensure everything was precisely choreographed across multiple cameras. Huge undertaking.
Any specific memories from the set that stand out in the book?
Well, Richard Widmark broke his ankle early on, but worked through the pain. Lawrence Harvey found Wayne amiable, but noted his increasing impatience as the shoot wore on, though Wayne never lost his temper with Harvey, perhaps seeing him as Sir Larry Harvey and treating him with extra deference. They had a very professional relationship, shared laughs.
Wayne's directing style on The Alamo drew some criticism compared to Ford's approach, right? More direct.
Yes. Ken Curtis, who was in the film, noted that unlike Ford's often cryptic method, Wayne would just tell actors, do it this way. Curtis observed his own son, Pat, imitating Wayne's walk and style on set, learning from his father. Curtis felt it was the nicest part he'd ever had in a film, though. And you can't talk about The Alamo without mentioning Dmitri Tiomkin's score. Huge score. Absolutely epic. The source notes, Wayne had an instinct for film music, and it turned out to be arguably Tiomkin's finest score, truly expanding his reputation for creating that grand, epic film music.
It's clear Wayne poured himself into that film. It was personal for him.
He did. He said he put my heart and soul into that picture, seeing it as more than just a historical event. It was a statement about America, freedom, and standing up to dictatorships. He acknowledged that the political left saw it as propaganda, but maintained it was also a great story and a grand piece of entertainment.
As he reached even greater heights of stardom, his political stances continued to create conflict. That whole thing with Frank Sinatra.
They did. Yeah, the source details a major clash with Frank Sinatra over Sinatra hiring blacklisted writer Carl Foreman for a film, The Execution of Private Slovic.
Right.
Wayne publicly attacked Sinatra and even implied Senator John Kennedy was involved. Sinatra ended up paying Foreman not to write the script.
Wow.
The book recounts a heated incident at a charity benefit where a drunk Sinatra confronted Wayne and friends had to pull him away. Wayne apparently believed Sinatra was a gangster with mafia ties. Pretty strong words.
Carl Foreman saw Wayne's actions as a direct attempt to force him out of Hollywood entirely.
That's how he perceived it, yeah. And as a response, he made the anti-war film The Victors in 1963, which he described as an antidote to Wayne's politics. He even included a scene with Sinatra singing over the execution of an American deserter, a direct shot back.
Despite that conflict, Wayne continued making hits like McClintock and Donovan's Reef in 1963, which kept him right at the top of the box office.
Yeah, McClintock was huge for him. And then there's that surprising cameo in George Stevens's epic The Greatest Story Ever Told in 1965, playing a Roman centurion.
I remember hearing about that. Why did he do it?
He played a centurion, yeah. Took the part partly to pay off a debt to United Artists after the Alamo's cost overruns. He said he felt like an expensive extra and had no lines, just like Sidney Poitier, who was also in the film.
No lines?
Nope. He deliberately left his helmet chin strap undone so you'd recognize him, though actress Carol Baker didn't at first glance. The source debunks that untrue story about his line delivery during the crucifixion scene. He simply had no lines.
His next film, Circus World, seemed to highlight the tension between creative vision and the demands of making a John Wayne movie. Capra walked.
It really did. Director Frank Capra wanted a quality drama, but screenwriter James Edward Grant was quite open about his approach to writing for Wayne. You needed elements like hoity-toity dame Duke can throw over his knee, collection of jerks he can smack. Capra ended up leaving the project when producer Sam Bronston sided with Wayne's preferred approach. Grant also famously noted you needed gags, flags, and cases in a Wayne film, meaning comedy, patriotism, and money. Formulaic, basically.
Working on Circus World also presented challenges with co-star Rita Hayworth. Her struggles.
The source mentions her struggles with drinking and being difficult on set. Wayne, in contrast, remained professional. It was during this film that he gave his daughter Isa advice about decency. Never thinking you're better or worse than anyone else, and always trying to be decent unless someone gives you a reason not to be.
That's nice advice. It was shortly after this, in 1964, that he received devastating health news.
Cancer.
Lung cancer.
Yeah.
The book describes the moment he told his son Michael and director Henry Hathaway during a meeting about the sons of Katie Elder, "I've got the big C," just like that.
Wow. Despite the diagnosis, he kept working, including El Dorado in 1966, directed by Howard Hawks, a sort of remake. Hawks essentially remade his own film, Rio Bravo, yeah, but with a different dynamic. Hawks defended it by saying it wasn't the same story, but he acknowledged Wayne had to carry the damn thing, while Dean Martin and Robert Mitchum, playing the drunk sheriff, had more showy fireworks in their roles.
This source really emphasizes Wayne's complete trust in Hawks. Didn't even read scripts.
It does. He often wouldn't even read scripts beforehand, just asking, what do I do, and learning his lines right there on set. He said he didn't always trust directors, but Hawks I trust with my life. That's real trust.
Then came The Green Berets in 1968, a film directly tied to his political convictions about the Vietnam War. Very controversial.
Hugely controversial. He felt a strong moral obligation to make a film that supported the government's policy in Vietnam. Screenwriter James Edward Grant describes struggling with hundreds of changes requested by the Pentagon, resulting in what he called a flag-waving war film. Grant noted the core message was stark. Communism is not an option. He contrasted the critical reaction to the Green Berets with that of films like Apocalypse. Now, even admiring the famous line, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning" as a writer, while finding the film it came from appalling as entertainment.
And the source includes a really striking anecdote about a supposed Viet Cong sniper during a research trip for the film.
Yeah.
Another assassination attempt.
Allegedly, yeah. During a visit to Vietnam, a Viet Cong sniper attempted to assassinate Wayne. According to the story relayed to the author by Yakima Canutt, the sniper was caught and confessed he was trying to kill him.
Unbelievable.
Wayne apparently kept this secret from his family, but later referenced it in a veiled way during a meeting related to President Nixon, pretending he hadn't discussed such threats with a Soviet interpreter, linking his stance and refusal to be intimidated to American courage after 9/11. Again, it's a dramatic, almost unbelievable story presented here.
Production details on The Green Berets also seem a bit complicated, according to the book. Who actually directed it?
Wayne was credited as co-director alongside Ray Kellogg, though Kellogg's actual involvement is questioned. Moven Leroy also reportedly directed, but didn't want credit. Actor David Jansen noted that despite Leroy being present, Wayne really took charge on set. Seems like Duke was calling the shots.
Even with his continued success, Wayne was aware that times were changing in Hollywood and the Western genre. Eastwood's rise.
He saw the rise of Clint Eastwood and his grittier, different style of Western. He confessed to cinematographer Bill Clothier that he initially didn't understand their appeal, but acknowledged times change, a point underscored by the lukewarm reception to his film The Undefeated. Clothier told him, "Duke, times change, you gotta change with them."
But he ended the decade on a major high note with an Oscar for True Grit.
Yes, winning the Best Actor Oscar for True Grit in 1969 for his portrayal of Rooster Cogburn. Critical opinions were somewhat split. Some saw it as over-the-top and hammy, while others hailed it as one of his finest movie triumphs. Bob Hope sent a great congratulatory telegram, and Wayne famously joked in his acceptance speech, "If I'd known this, I'd have put that eye patch on 35 years ago." Classic Duke humor.
Despite that late career triumph, Howard Hawks had a pretty blunt assessment of his later action roles. Too old.
Hawks felt Wayne was getting too old for them, yeah. He called it pitiful that Wayne wanted to play an old gunfighter who needed glasses in Rio Lobo, saying he couldn't move like a big cat anymore, and audiences didn't want to see him like that. Pretty harsh from Hawks.
Ouch. Beyond acting, he also moved into various business ventures later in life. Oil wells, hotels.
He did. After firing an incompetent son-in-law who was managing things, he acquired oil wells, hotels, apartment buildings. He was damn near 70 and unsure how much longer he could keep up the acting pace, and he wanted to ensure he had enough money for his young family.
His film The Cowboys, in 1972, generated some controversy over its violence, killing Duke.
Yeah, that was shocking at the time. The source notes critics often contrasted its violence favorably with films like Straw Dogs, describing the cowboys as an initiation rite, not an evisceration ceremony. However, the book attributes the film's initial failure to Warner Bros., heavily publicizing his character's death scene in the trailers.
Oh, he spoiled it.
Which, the source says, completely removed its emotional impact for viewers. Big mistake.
His personal life faced another major challenge starting in 1973. Divorce from Pilar.
His third divorce, yeah. Claire Trevor felt this marked the beginning of the end for everything in his life. The book indicates Wayne was mortified by the prospect and desperately hoped Pilar wouldn't go through with it, even if they couldn't live together anymore.
He continued to face public scrutiny, perhaps most famously in 1974 at Harvard University, the tank incident.
Oh yeah, the Harvard Lampoon challenged him as the biggest fraud in history. So he famously rode into Harvard Square on an actual tank to face a hostile crowd of thousands.
That took guts.
It did. The book recounts his composed, direct responses to questions about politics, Nixon, the media. He told the students that their education was a privilege and criticized those who would destroy property. He blamed the news media for Nixon's downfall, saying they had more power than the railroads did in 1890 and were just striking attitudes. Vintage Wayne.
And the book mentions even simple things like traveling became a challenge with the constant attention. The press mob.
Yes, there's a story about a Spanish waiter who helped him escape a press mob at the London airport by bringing him a drink. The source notes Wayne was starting to show the strain, looking like he was about to explode.
His health continued to decline in the mid-70s, that viral infection.
In 1974, during that same London trip, he caught a severe viral infection that caused bleeding lungs. Despite being seriously unwell, he refused to stop, taping TV shows until a doctor finally ordered him to bed, just wouldn't give in.
This vulnerability was really brought to the screen in his final film, The Shootist, in 1976, playing a dying gunfighter.
Eerily mirroring his own reality, he played a famous, aging gunfighter dying of cancer. Director Don Siegel recounted the difficulties of working with Wayne due to his illness and frustration. He was angry at everything because he couldn't smoke, he couldn't drink.
Tough situation.
But Siegel also shared a poignant anecdote. Wayne directed a scene himself, demonstrating how he wanted it done, and later came to Siegel with tears in his eyes, apologizing.
Wow.
The film also featured his old friend Jimmy Stewart, and the book mentions their touching embrace on set and how they collaborated on playing a final scene together in a touching, matter-of-factly way. Two legends at the end.
There are conflicting accounts about his personal life right at the end. Pat Stacey, reconciling with Peeler.
The source touches on conflicting stories about his relationship with his secretary, Pat Stacey, and whether he ultimately wanted to reconcile with Pilar. It's unclear. The book includes a blunt quote from Loretta Young, who was a devout Christian Scientist, stating, "You can't be a Christian Scientist and be married to John Wayne," highlighting the perceived incompatibility of their lifestyles and beliefs from her perspective.
The book also gives us some insight into his own religious views. Believed in God, but not organized religion.
He believed in a supreme being, yeah, but wasn't tied to organized religion. He felt God couldn't possibly be that disorganized.
Well,
He respected the traditions of his wife's Catholicism and admired Mormons, seeing them as fundamentally American pioneers, but didn't practice their faiths himself.
right.
He also had that bombastic public view about not trusting men who didn't drink, calling them not real men.
Right, I've heard that.
But the source notes he actually respected teetotalers' strong will and was partly just boosting his own image. He liked drinking, simple as that, and wasn't an alcoholic.
His health challenges continued right up to the end, the heart surgery.
He had a major heart operation in 1978 to replace a valve, a pig valve. Bob Hope's message from the 1978 Oscars, where Hope joked they expected him back next year, reportedly really motivated him to appear at the 1979 awards.
And that appearance at the 1979 Academy Awards was incredibly moving for everyone watching. Frail but determined.
It was. He looked frail, older, but so determined, walking onto that stage to a massive standing ovation. He presented the Best Picture award to The Deer Hunter, a film he famously disliked.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Ava Gardner noted how tightly Sammy Davis Jr. hugged him backstage, likely unaware Wayne was in terrible pain.
The author reflects on Wayne's death in 1979 at age 72, after making nearly 200 films over 50-plus years.
A long career. The source acknowledges that many of those films were frankly lousy or just moderately good, with only a handful truly being outstanding. And yet, through sheer force of personality and consistency, he became a living legend.
Claire Trevor believed his older children did love and respect him, despite his lifelong feeling that they hadn't forgiven him for leaving their mother.
Yes, she saw Michael as embodying his father's tough man persona, and Patrick, with his father's humor, suggesting a strong connection and respect was there, even if Wayne couldn't always see it himself.
And the author, Michael Munn, had that brief personal connection, that friendship. It must have been hard for him.
He writes that he found it hard to believe Wayne had died, always expecting him to pull through. Claire Trevor apparently reassured the author that if he had just shown up at the hospital, Wayne would have remembered him and invited him to stay, maybe even forever. A nice thought.
And the author ends with this personal, abiding memory of Wayne that still makes him smile.
It brings the whole detailed account back to the personal level, reminding you that behind the icon was a man who, impacted people's lives.
So, what you see from this deep dive into the source material is the rich, complex portrait of John Wayne, the shy, anxious boy who became the ultimate icon of courage and the American pioneer spirit. The actor who learned his craft in the B-movie trenches and became a global legend. The man of fiercely held convictions who could be tough on set and in public, yet was capable of deep friendship, immense guilt over personal struggles, and was utterly devoted to his family, even through distance and conflict.
Based on this material, he emerges as a man who, with all his flaws and contradictions laid bare, genuinely tried to do what was right, as the author suggests. That seems to be the core takeaway.
When you consider the conflicting stories about his relationships, his strong political actions, and the intense reactions they provoked, and even disagreements about how he wanted to be remembered after his death.
The source notes his son Michael said he died a Catholic, while his daughter Isis says his wishes to be cremated were ignored. It raises a fascinating question for you, doesn't it? How do we, as the audience, reconcile the carefully crafted, larger-than-life public image of John Wayne with the complex, often struggling private man revealed in these accounts from those who knew him best? What does it truly take for the legend to become indistinguishable from the fact in the public consciousness? Something to think about.